My name is Dr. Kevin Pecca. I wanted to make a podcast that exposes people to the true miracles of life and health. All the guests on this show have been specially picked because they bring something positive to the world. They have some of the most amazing and inspiring life stories. These people have a passion for living, healing, and leaving the world better than they found it. There is something inside these people that made them keep fighting through all the tough times, even when people told them it was not possible. They carried on and made their lives beautiful again. And now they are sharing their experiences with the world. This is the Expect Miracles podcast. Enjoy the show. Today on the Expect Miracles podcast, we have Dr. Tyler Evans. Dr. Tyler is a Blair upper cervical chiropractor out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He holds an advanced certification in evaluation and treatment of the craniocervical junction as a diplomate awarded by the International Chiropractic Association. Today on the podcast, Dr. Evans enlightens us about concussions in sports, the research behind the upper cervical adjustment, and a solution to help resolve many neurological issues people are suffering with today. Please welcome Dr. Tyler Evans.
Darren pushed me to go do the upper cervical diplomate for 3 years from 2013 until 2.5 years, 2013 to 2015. Graduated, and once I done that, I was solid and set in my ways in the upper cervical profession and haven't looked back since.
Love that. Now, Dr. Tyler, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the upper cervical chiropractic world. We have the cone beam CAT scans, which are giving us great results, new imaging, right, which is further proving what Dr. Blair and Dr. BJ Palmer were talking about so many years ago.
Right.
There's also a ton of research and stuff on concussions and chiropractic care, and you are one of the best people to talk to about that. So I'm very excited to dive deep into that and get your opinion on that. So with all the sports injuries with football and hockey and all the contact sports, a lot of kids, teens, and adults, after they're done playing, they're left with a lot of serious neurological issues like brain fog and headaches and difficulty concentrating and severe depression. And what we're finding,
I've had many concussions, man.
Yeah. And so what we're finding is there's a solution, and it could be in the upper part of your neck. And so if we can just go dive into that and how upper cervical chiropractic can help concussions and other neurological issues like that, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually, right before we got on this call, I printed off 2 papers that I've talked with many people over the last year or so about, because they're really great. And if you're an upper cervical chiropractor, you should know these papers. Or if you're a person that has experienced some concussion effect, like post-concussion syndrome, understanding the physiology is really important to healing. Concussion has been expanded in the last, I would say, 10 years into a full body effect. But before the last 10 years, it was all just you hit your head, you shook your brain.
Suck it up, get back out there.
Get back out there, go play, right? And so, like, for instance, I played high school football.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little guy. I think I weighed about 150 pounds and I was 6'1",
wow.
So tiny.
Yeah.
Just skinny. Took some pretty good hits. I remember one hit in particular where 2 guys came from the side, smacked me. And I just remember being blacked out and waking up on the field, and my buddies coming up, my teammates coming up and be like, get up, come on, let's go.
They're like pulling you up.
That was like 2001, 2000, right? So that was a long time ago. And concussion wasn't in the news then, right? Like it wasn't top of mind. But since then, they've done a lot of work within the high schools team environment to bring in experts and do some concussion analysis, the impact test. So they're doing a lot to like change that. But a lot of that came about from the NFL, what's been happening in the NFL. So I don't know if...
Just to touch on that real quick, what you just said, sometimes you get smacked upside the head and you feel it. Other times, it doesn't even have to be that big. My last concussion that took me out of everything.
Yeah.
Nobody saw me got hit. It was just like just a little like elbow to the head, probably the lightest one I've ever gotten. And that's the one that didn't go away. So that's why a lot of people can't connect the dots.
Totally.
That's what's frustrating. Yeah.
I'll talk to that point in just a minute. I want to build this case. But so, back in I don't know if have done this journey, but back in the early 90s, they started the inquiry in the NFL into concussion, mostly because they were held to the fire by wives of former players that had literally lost their minds and were living out of their trucks, doing terrible things to their bodies, and just, they were wrecked.
Yeah.
This came from Pittsburgh, was where it started with Dr. Malu. He started looking at the brains of these players that were famous players in the 70s and 80s that then had basically their brains had fallen apart, and they had either committed suicide because they had lost their minds, or they had just gotten to a point where they didn't know where to turn. And so when they died, they donated their bodies to science, right? And so they've now done 200 studies on the brains of these people that have either played football and got many concussions, or soccer, or extreme sports where they've hit their head many times.
Oh, yeah.
They've studied these people's brains, and it's not good. These long-term effects from hitting your head, even like you said, slight hits at the end, they cause a terrible effect, right? So there's science coming out now that is showing that hitting your head and taking impact on a consistent basis, it deteriorates your entire body through the brain, the nervous system, and partly the neck. And so if we can talk about that for a second.
What are those protein tangles?
Tau proteins.
Tau proteins?
Yeah. And then you have CTE, so you have chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of eats away the brain. And literally, man, it's sad to say, but there's 18-year-olds that have been in this study, high school. I try not to talk too negatively about football because I played it. I liked it. I liked playing it. But you should be aware, right?
Absolutely.
So mothers and fathers of children that play peewee football, that play high school football, we're not making this stuff up.
Yeah.
You can't reverse it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important that parents know this, because there are children that have died in games, right, from hits, as well as that actually had brain changes that then led to them committing suicide.
Yeah, that's so sad. Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
So anyways, I don't want to go too heavy on the negative stuff, but it's important. And I feel like people should know that. So there's a lot of research on that. That is coming out of Boston. I think it's called HOPE. It's the Boston hospital that the doctor is studying the brains from these NFL players that's coming out. They've done 200. They've done 200 studies. 111 of them were NFL players. 110 of them had CTE.
110 out of the 111 studied had CTE.
Well, yeah. And then 200 of the people were from other sports, and most of them had CTE as well.
Wow.
And had chronic concussion injuries.
That is alarming.
So it's alarming, right? And so then we ask, well, why is the brain not healing after concussion, right? What are the things that are happening? Well, you have a glutamate response. So you have this barrage of chemicals that basically the body goes into a shock. The brain goes into a shock state. And so it has this barrage of chemicals in the brain that slowly dissipates over time if we're lucky. But like you were saying, if you could just get so many concussions that now we're wrapped up in this post-concussion syndrome because you didn't heal from the last one, now you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right? Because now the brain's not healing. Well, why isn't the brain healing? Part of it's probably because of the neck. Because that's how the fluid escapes. That's how the body heals, is through the blood, right? The blood flow. And if your neck is locked out of position, the blood flow can't go back and forth, and the CSF can't go back and forth, and neither can the nerve flow. So there's a couple of papers here that are really great. So one titled "The Role of the Cervical Spine in Post-Concussion Syndrome." If you deal with PCS patients, this paper basically tells them, get the neck checked. Yeah. This is from John Letty and Howard Vernon and a couple other guys. But John Letty, I don't know if you've studied this stuff, but John Letty is a highly respected post-concussion researcher in Buffalo. He's the guy that came up with the Buffalo treadmill test, I think, or Buffalo treadmill study.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, so he's really well known in the concussion world. And this paper talks about how it takes, it's 96.1 Gs on average to cause a concussion. He says 60 to 160 is a range. G's of force, right? So G represents gravity. So how much force it takes to cause a concussion is 96.1. if you break it down, you go through the paper, it takes 4.5 grams or gravities, G's of force to cause tissue damage in the neck.
So what are we talking about there? What kind of force is that relative to?
Right. So if we're talking about like you getting bumped, that's probably somewhere in 1 to 2 to G's there, right? If you're just getting bumped, you talk about 4.5 G's, that's probably a rear end accident, right? That's why you can get, somebody gets rear-ended.
Yeah.
They're not making it up when they have neck issues because they were rear-ended at 10 miles an hour.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, you're making it up," and they
weren't going fast enough to cause that damage.
Fast enough. No, and so that's another thing. I don't want to get too far off topic, but insurance companies for the past 20 years. So this is from Scott Rosa. Well, information isn't from Scott Rosa, but Dr. Rosa taught us in the Upper Cervical Diplomate about the history of insurance companies and how they try to protect themselves. Their job is not to pay out every single injury. Their job is to discriminate which ones are big enough and which ones really determine that need paying out on. And so anything under 30 miles an hour for a long time, they just said, "Oh, they're making it up." They actually had videos where they trained their staff to swat down anybody that came in and said that they had neck pain after a low speed impact. And that's kind of rough, right? Like that's not cool. So anyways, the point is slow or low amount of G's can still cause a problem. Okay. And so what it says is 4.5 G's is enough to cause tissue damage. But then what we know is that up to 10 to 12 G's is what causes the condition termed whiplash. Whiplash gets a bad name, right? So whiplash, it's actually whiplash associated disorders. Whiplash is the action. It's the deceleration, acceleration of the neck.
Yeah.
That's the mode of the problem. But whiplash associated disorders would be neck pain is like stage 1. Stage 2 is neck pain with decreased range of motion. Stage 3 is when you have maybe numbness and tingling or a DTR that's lowered because of the injury. So you have these stages of whiplash, and depending on how hard you were hit, you have more whiplash.
Yeah.
But then that whole thing, right? So if you look at it, if you have a concussion that happens at 60 to 160 Gs, well, what's happening at low speed, right?
Yeah.
It's just wrecking the neck, right? So if the neck is already in trouble at 10 to 12 Gs, you're going 60 to 160. What do you think is happening, right?
Nothing
so the
good.
neck is just, the neck is just getting exploded.
Yeah.
And then, we've got the brain problem, but the neck is in trouble. And so if we can get the neck aligned, it allows the brain to heal.
Yeah. Well, and that cranial-cervical junction is right there where the brainstem is, and that's technically in the upper neck, which is our control center, right? So
right. And so, and that goes into a whole nother paper. I mean, there's a couple other papers that we could cite there. What is it? The role of the cranial-cervical junction in hydrodynamics by Michael Flanagan. That paper is a beautiful paper. He since passed away, but if you get a chance, another book to read is Downside of Upright Posture. Have you heard of that book?
No, I haven't.
Oh, such a good book. It's really great right up until the last chapter when he starts talking about how the pyramids were built by the aliens. But
no way. You squeezed that in there, huh?
I was like, what happened here?
That is great.
But that whole book and his whole concept, I mean, Scott Rosa and him kind of came out with the ideas at similar times about how fluid flow is the cranial-cervical junction is the gatekeeper for basically that fluid flow and information balance between the brain and the body. I should have actually brought my big CCJ model, and I didn't. But you've got the contents of the brain, the cerebellum and the brainstem sits right in the CCJ.
Yeah.
And then the CCJ, or the upper cervical spine, they're synonymous. The cranial-cervical junction and the upper cervical spine, two synonymous names there. That joint is the most freely movable joint in the spine.
There's no disc space there, right?
There's no disc above or below it. What holds it in place are postural reflexes by muscles, ligaments, and tendons. And so when you have an injury like a whiplash or a concussion, it's over. Those reflexes are overridden that hold the joint in place. It's the only joint that can't self-correct. The rest of the joints down lower can self-correct. And so if you know that physiology, if you understand that physiology, maybe that's the first place we should look after a concussion.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
It's the most freely movable joint in a place where most of our automatic neurology is sitting.
Yeah.
Our breathing, heart rate. I mean, I had a guy last night. I gave a health class last night. He's a good friend of mine, but he came up to me and we were just talking about chiropractic's not about neck pain, back pain. It's about whole body health. It's about the nervous system. And he says, you know, Dr. Evans, he's been under care for 8 weeks. He says for years, he has attempted to lower his blood pressure with diet and exercise. He had no avail, right? Like no effect. 8 weeks of upper cervical chiropractic care. His blood pressure is now normalized.
It's amazing.
I know it. I know it happens, and miracles happen in our practices every day. And we just kind of like, yep, I know. Yeah. It's the neurology makes sense. I get it. But this is what I'm saying is that is the automatic nervous system's central control is the brainstem.
Self-correcting,
right up here, right? So anyways, if you can't hit your head without hurting your neck. And then the last to your point with the bump in the shoulder.
Yeah.
This paper is fantastic. Concussion with primary impact to the chest and the potential role of neck tension.
Oh, that's interesting.
This paper just came out and it blew my mind. When I read it, you read the title of a paper and you're like, okay, I think I know what that paper is about. So I read through it. Obviously, they went through and studied. This just came out in 2018. Jamie Browning from Sherman, she actually sent me this paper. She's amazing. But wild stuff. The helmeted ATD or dummy in the study, so they took 2 dummies and they hit them and then studied what happened in the dummy, in the chest, in the head, and basically the neck and the head. They found that there was a 40% increased neck tensile force with the dummy that had on a helmet.
Increased?
Increased.
How does that happen?
Because it's weight on the head, right? And so this whole thing with putting on helmet, Rydell, and I don't know if you're following on this, but
yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's a huge problem for football specifically.
Right. So you put on a helmet, you think you're safe, and Rydell's out there doing all this research trying to make the helmet concussion safe, make things safer. I don't think so, man. Like you're trying to...
Football helmets are heavy too.
They're heavy.
Those are heavy. Like hockey helmets are nice and light. Football helmets, like your neck is sore wearing one for like a day or two.
Right. Yeah. Like I used to wear mine mowing the lawn to train my neck. I did. That's what my coach had us do. He would be like, go home, wear your helmet over the weekend when you're mowing the lawn. That way you build muscle strength, right? So, but it's a real thing, right? And so this is important information. And this just came out in August. So there's been a few papers lately that are starting to point at the neck has a lot to do with what's happening in the healing of the brain. And when you take a hit to the chest, these dummies, they did a dummy and then they also studied a live NFL, 2 live hits on NFL video that caused concussions in this paper. Yeah. And they were hits to the chest that caused concussion.
Yeah, right? Like your neck is just getting thrown forward.
Right. Yep. It's this thing.
With that extra weight.
Right. So you're increasing tension on the neck and the neck is just a break point and the joint can't hold. Right. And again, so if you come back to what's happening at the CCJ, most freely movable joint in the spine, it's only held together by ligaments, tendons, and muscles, not a bony lock. The rest of the joints in the spine have bony locks. There's your fuse breaker. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So it blows and it tries to save everything else. But then long term, you have these depression, anxiety, brain fog, memory loss, all this stuff.
So, Dr. Tyler, what can upper cervical do for these people that have had the post-concussion syndrome or just straight off of a concussion? What can upper cervical chiropractor do for these people? And maybe people that have been suffering for 20 years with this that haven't had any relief. What can it do for them?
Well, I always go back to it is a piece of the puzzle. Yeah. And it's not a panacea. But the first place I would go is to the upper cervical chiropractor to get my neck checked so that my brain can heal. Yeah. We work with an amazing optometrist. You met her, Dr.
I'm trying to get her on here.
Dude, you should. You really should. She's amazing. She's kind of a tough lady to get a hold of because she's so busy.
She's really busy. She's great.
She is awesome. So we work with Dr. Przinski a lot. And She does amazing things with the eyes and healing. So that's another piece, right? So the eyes can be a very large influence over healing from a concussion. But upper cervical, I have seen in our office, because Dr. Przinsky has referred a lot of her chronic brain injury patients that deal with depression, anxiety, brain fog, memory loss, fatigue, all this stuff. In the community here, in the Seacoast community, we have kind of positioned ourselves into the community as head and neck experts, as head and neck trauma people. So we've worked into that community. We're familiar with what techniques and modalities are out there. And the medical system is helpful because they analyze it.
Very good
diagnostics, right? And so you do need that diagnosis. And we send people to Dr. Kevin Heaton, who's around here in the Seacoast. He's a great doc to go through and then do some PT. They do some PT and help rehabilitate the body, because you need to move the body. That's part of the healing process. But if that neck isn't in alignment, you're not going to get that lasting healing nervous system ability to come back to zero. I've had many young people, football players. I've had many football players and just little kids that had injuries. They fell off something, hit their head, and they have post-concussion syndrome. Sometimes they don't know it, right?
Yeah.
I can't diagnose as a chiropractor, so I just tell them, this is what I'm seeing. You should go see Dr. Heaton. You should go see Dr. Przinsky. You should go see these other people to help you. But what we see is over a course of 8 weeks, course of 6 months, and it takes time sometimes.
I was just about to mention, I'm glad you said that, because sometimes we do get those amazing cases where the brain fog and the headaches and everything, they lift right off on the first week. But there are a good amount of times where you're not seeing much improvement the first couple weeks. It is a brain injury, a different type of injury. It takes a while to heal. So there is a time aspect sometimes too.
Huge. And I always say that right from the start. I tell my patients there's basically 4 different tissues that we're working with in the body, and they all heal at different rates. So you have muscles heal fairly quickly. If you go to the gym, you work out, you build muscle, it takes 3 days at a minimum a week to heal. And if you tear a muscle, maybe it's 4 weeks for it to heal, but they heal pretty quickly, right? And so oftentimes that's why people start to feel better quickly, because neck pain or back pain goes away quickly.
Right.
But you have to remember that you have nerves, ligaments, and tendons in there. And those nerves, depending on where they're at, 90 days at a minimum for a nerve to really start to heal. So if somebody has numbness and tingling, sometimes it'll go right away, but that's nice. But we see 90 days at a minimum for nerves. And then if you're talking about the brain, we're talking about some serious nerve healing that has to happen. And I always say that's 6 months. It's at a minimum. And so that way expectations are managed, because that's always an important piece of care is managing expectations and then supporting them. So make sure that they get their eyes checked by a neuro-optometrist. Make sure that they do get a full exam by a concussion expert medical doctor. Make sure they're doing some PT. They need to move their body. That's a huge piece of healing, is moving the body. So if they're not, I can adjust until the cows come home. But if you're not moving your body, you're not going to heal.
Yeah. So, okay. That's interesting that you brought that up. So we definitely want movement and everything, but you also have to be careful that this stays in alignment. Right. So what do you recommend as far as movement and physical therapy? Do you have them stay away from the neck and work on everything else? How do you do that?
Yes. So let's avoid anything on the neck and the head for at least 30 days. That's how we start. So usually when patients come in, if they aren't already treating with a massage therapist or a physical therapist, because I don't try to tell other therapists what to do, but we build that in, right? So once we stabilize the neck, because first you have to stabilize the joint, and then the muscles have to build strength around that.
Right.
Once they stabilize, then you can start doing this other stuff. And with PCS, they always say, after a concussion, they always say, give it a week or two. If it starts to heal, then you can get back to slowly adding in work. I mean, I've got one patient that she's 21, 22. She's hit her head so many times, she can't count how many concussions she's had. But the last one was a bad one about a year and a half ago. She turned and hit her head on a cabinet in a lab in college. She was studying to be a medical doctor. Basically, her whole life changed, and she hasn't been the same since. She was locked up in a dark room for 6 months, crying and couldn't do anything. Actually, not an upper cervical chiropractor, but a chiropractic neurologist really helped her rehabilitate by slowly adding in life, slowly adding in. I mean, depending on the case, some of these people, it's tough. It's real hard. We're talking about near-death stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's a slow process for some people. Some people, it's quick,
Yeah.
But for the most part, we really try to err on the side of move slow, build it in slow. So getting back to rehabilitation stuff, something else that's really important and things that support care are supplements, right?
Okay.
So, I don't know if you do any of that in your office. I was always kind of on the fence on it. I've seen some really good changes with CBD.
CBD is great. Yeah.
CBD as well as.
So what's New Hampshire? Well, actually, I guess you can get it in Jersey, in the stores and everything.
In the store.
Now.
You can get it.
So is it, I know Maine's legal. Yeah. Is New Hampshire legal?
New Hampshire is not legal. Maine and Mass are legal. New Hampshire is not.
So do you sell the CBD out of your office?
No, I mean, we don't, but I kind of guide patients on where to go get it.
Yeah. Because there are definitely products that are better
than others. Yeah. Well, let's not get into that here, but CBD is very helpful. And if you have questions about it, you can always reach out to me or you, Dr. Pecca. But so CBD is really great because it lowers the inflammation process, right? And so that's what we're always trying to do is we're trying to lower the inflammatory markers in the body and in the brain and in the nervous system. So if we can lower that inflammation in the brain with CBD, if we can lower that inflammation in the brain with omega-3s, high potency omega-3s. So we use a Pro Omega from Nordic Naturals in our office that is 2,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA. People bring in their supplements and they're crap.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why supplements get a bad name. You wonder why people don't get changes with supplementation. Well, it's because they bought their omega-3s at Costco or at BJ's. Yeah. That doesn't work. That stuff is trash.
Yeah.
Like, throw it out.
What makes bad fish oil supplements?
Oh,
quality of the fish that they're pulling it from?
The quality of fish, right? And so there is a lot of trouble that you can get into with a fish, right? So if you're not getting cold, deep water fish that are wild caught, you can run into some trouble with either the farming aspect where you're getting hormones that are in the fish oil, because the oil that's the lifeblood of the fish, right? So what's in there is basically the reflection of how its health was. So fish accumulate heavy metals, they accumulate toxins. And the fish that we're eating, right? So the fish that we end up putting in the oil, those are the ones that accumulate the heavy metal toxins. So we have to be really careful about that. And if you get a low quality supplement, man, you don't know what's in there. And then also they don't have the EPA and they don't have the DHA. And those are the healing components of the omega-3. So it's really important that you're taking a solid omega-3. I mean, I've had patients that came in, we were getting good results, right? So literally on her MRI, brain shifted to the left. In the skull, here's the center of the skull. Her brain is shifted to the left. She was an ASL, adjusted her. We haven't done a post-MRI, but she immediately felt huge changes in thought and consciousness and neck pain and back pain and all that. But then slowly over time, we were like, okay, well, we're kind of plateauing here. What else can we do? And we added in omega-3s, good omega-3. And she actually doubled her dose. So you can take up to, I believe it's 5 or 6 grams of omega-3s a day. Mm-hmm. And so you want to basically get as much of that in there as you can without thinning the blood, because that's what starts to happen is you start to thin the blood, and that becomes a problem for some people.
Do you have to be careful if these patients are on any other medication?
Yes, you do. So, and that's why it's really important that they consult with a doctor, make sure that whoever their concussion doctor or whoever their primary care doctor is, that they're on track with that.
Which ones do you have to be careful of?
Blood thinners.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. That's the one.
Okay.
So that's about it. So omega-3s, you can updose with those. So that was 4 pills of the good omega-3 a day. And she started to notice huge changes, right? Huge changes.
Dr. Tyler, when do you start the supplement implementation? Because sometimes if you do too much all at once,
it either
could be too much for the body to handle, or sometimes I've had people that were doing a lot of things at once, and they come in and they're like, they're feeling so much better. They're like, you know what? I think it's a supplementation that's really making me feel good. And in my mind, I'm like, I think it's the upper cervical care, but.
Well, and it's usually both, right?
Yeah.
And I always say that. But what I always do say is give this 2 to 4 to 6 weeks of let's stabilize things. And then let's start adding things in, because you're totally right. And you can do too much at once. And you get those two things that crop up. You get patients that come in and say, well, I'm all better. I don't think it was from your care. And it's like, okay, well, all right. But so, and then the other side of it, sometimes you can overload the system, or just people feel overwhelmed, and you don't want to overwhelm people, but you kind of have to lead them, right? Yeah. It's a process, but I think upper cervical care is a invaluable tool in healing the brain. I think that's where the upper cervical profession needs to really focus. And Heidi Havoc, are you familiar with Heidi Havoc, Taylor?
No, I'm not.
Or Heidi Havoc, no. Look her up. She's amazing. You might even try to have her on this podcast someday.
What, is she an upper cervical doctor?
She is a chiropractor out of New Zealand.
Okay.
And she is doing some of the most cutting edge research in the world on chiropractic. She's showing that the subluxation is not necessarily right. So we think of the misalignment in the spine being the subluxation. Well, yes, that's true. But what the research is starting to show is that, the bone goes out of place. C1 is the most freely movable bone. So when it locks out in a big way, bigger than any other joint. But the brain is what's holding it out, right? Like the brain is not what's not able to pull it back in. The brain's able to pull everything else back in if C1's in place. So really where things are locked are in the brain. And so we are brain doctors. Like you got to get your head around that. Like we are central nervous system doctors. And so what her research is showing is that when you adjust the cervical spine, or when you adjust thoracic spine or the lumbar spine, you're making changes in the spine there, but you're making bigger changes in the brain, in the frontal cortex. That's where this science needs to head, right? And so when we talk about concussions and healing, we're making changes directly in the nervous tissue in the brain when we apply our corrective adjustment to the spine. That's what her research is all about. Her research is not necessarily like technique specific. She's very against like splitting up chiropractic, and she's more about verifying subluxation and what it does in the brain. She's got these amazing studies that I don't even understand the words that are in the papers, but they're that high level, but they're beautiful papers. And she's building a case that chiropractic is about, nervous system health, and it's about changes in the brain. That's where we need to look in upper cervical, because I think that we are cutting edge on, with that. Like we are like not just changing the way the nerves fire, but we're actually shifting how the tissue sits in the skull, in that upper neck, when we adjust properly and get things lined up. So, amazing, exciting stuff.
Yeah. Dr. Evans, I like to ask all the guests at the end of the show, what is one piece of advice that you have taken with you over the years that you would like to share with the audience? Could be absolutely anything.
Oh, that's really good. One piece of advice. It's easy to get caught up. So focus on concussion, or focus on kind of what we talked about today. It's easy to get caught up in what's happening to you, and remember that there are other people out there that can support you and can be there for you. I mean, I've gone through a lot with healing my body and healing from these concussions. And I got frustrated in the beginning because even in chiropractic school, like felt like I got over adjusted. Mm-hmm. I struggled with my health. I actually had to take a semester off because I got really sick. Mm-hmm. And I got frustrated, but realizing that there are answers out there, just keep looking. And it really does take a team to heal the body, focusing on nutrition. I always talk about the 5 pillars of health. So eat well, sleep well, think well, move well, and have a healthy structure and functioning nervous system, right? So it's all those pieces. Just keep working at it. Reach out if you have questions.
And Dr. Evans, where can people find you online, website, social media, all that stuff?
That's great. So aritechiro.com is our website. We also have a YouTube page. I have put in a consistent effort to build videos, short 5 to 10 minute videos that break down papers just like this one. I actually broke this paper down just the other day because I think that information needs to get out there. And I think that people need to understand it because we can all get this stuff.
Yeah.
We're in a day and age now where you have access to the world, right, at your fingertips. Everyone has access to the same scientific information I do. I really try to push people in that direction, try to understand the physiology, because if you understand that better, you can better take care of yourself. You have to be the doctor, right? Yeah. So our videos on YouTube, we really push that and try to get education out on that. And we have a Facebook page. That's where we post a lot of our videos and do Facebook Lives just like this. So
perfect. Well, Dr. Evans, thank you so much for coming on. Really loved this episode.
Yeah, me too. Awesome. Thank you, Kevin, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so this will be out in a couple weeks. I'll send you all the links and everything. Thanks again for coming on. I'll talk to you soon, Tyler.
Okay. All right. Have a great day, Kevin.
All right. You too. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, subscribe, give us 5 stars, and leave a review. It really helps boost the podcast and spread the good word. My chiropractic practice is located in West Orange, New Jersey at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. You can also find us on Facebook at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. All of my information is on my website at drkevinpecca.com, drkevinpecca.com. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dr. Kevin Pecca for podcast episodes, patient testimonials, and educational videos. I have daily affirmations and inspirational quotes on Instagram at Easel Affirmations, EASEL Affirmations. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at drkevinpecca@gmail.com, drkevinpecca@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Cheers.